Living with migraine means fighting two battles every day of your life: the battle to function and feel better, and the battle to be heard, seen, and understood. I'm Danielle Vinci. Welcome to the Migraine Circle podcast by CEFALY, the podcast that gives you expert insights and practical tools to help you manage migraine and get back to life. Today, we're joined by Cannon. You might know her on Instagram or TikTok as Migraine Babe. Cannon lives with a rare and often misunderstood type of migraine called MUMS, migraine with unilateral motor symptoms. Her journey through diagnosis, treatment, and learning how to live a full life with chronic migraine is powerful and deeply relatable. She's here to share her story, her go-to tools, and how she still finds joy even on its harder days. Cannon, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So let's dive into it. Let's start by giving a little background. I know a lot of people in the migraine community still haven't heard about MUMS or may know what it is. Can you tell us about MUMS?
Sure. So I think one of the more surprising things about MUMS is that it is much more common than people think. And the majority of people who are diagnosed with hemiplegic migraine most likely have MUMS. So MUMS is a little known type of migraine known for its sensory symptoms. And these hallmark symptoms can include hemiparesis, paresthesia. Hemiparesis is one-sided weakness. Paresthesia, which is tingling. Visual symptoms. My visual symptoms can include more traditional scotomas. Sometimes I'll see scintillating scotomas. I can have blurred vision, double vision. My vision can go pretty much like just wild and bonkers. Then it also can have messed up proprioception, and that is more related to the hemiparesis itself, and dysphasic symptoms, and more. And what's interesting with MUMS is, and to understand how MUMS is distinct from other migraine types, is to understand what migraine aura is. And migraine aura is when you have an electrochemical wave that travels from the back of the brain to the front. And where the wave travels determines which aura you're experiencing. So the back of the brain would be the visual cortex, and that's when someone would experience the visual aura. So you cannot experience multiple auras really at once. I believe it can happen in very rare occasions, but overall it does not happen. And so what happens with MUMS, which is different, is that the person will experience all of these symptoms at one time. So as opposed to experiencing a visual aura that lasts for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 60 minutes, whatnot, then transitioning to another aura, whether it's tingling or a dysphasic symptom, with MUMS, you experience it all kind of at the same time, which can be super confusing and overwhelming. And because MUMS has weakness, and because MUMS is so stroke-like, many people will associate it with hemiplegic migraine, which is the migraine with aura subtype that has weakness associated with it. Or it will fall under the definition of complex migraine, which is kind of an inaccurate catch-all term for different migraine with aura subtypes. When it comes to MUMS's weakness being associated with proprioception, it's that your body doesn't know where it is in space, and so it feels heavy. So my arm always feels weak, even though it physically is not weak. It always has this sense of weakness. And that's the other distinguishing factor with MUMS and with migraine with aura, is that the migraine with auras are fully reversible. And with MUMS, the symptoms are not fully reversible for many of the patients. So between attacks, the patient will still experience these symptoms similar to someone who has vestibular migraine, but on a much lower level of severity, like with vestibular migraine. So when I'm having an attack, my whole right side will be really weak, and then the left side of my face will droop. And then here you can see that I'm not experiencing those symptoms. So that's kind of what MUMS is in a nutshell, and how it differs from other migraine types.
That was great. That sounds horribly scary. How'd your diagnosis look to figure this all out?
So my diagnosis, I think, reflects a lot of people who have MUMS. I originally was I was first diagnosed with vestibular migraine, which I do have. And it is common for people with MUMS to also have vestibular migraine. And MUMS, it characteristically, or it can take place, people can develop it as their migraine disease gets worse and weirder. Kind of as people become more severe on the spectrum, their symptoms become less stereotypical migraine. So I first developed vestibular migraine and I had those symptoms for several years. And then my symptoms became more MUMS-like. And it took 8 years before I received the formal MUMS diagnosis. For a while, I just was told it was complicated migraine and then hemiplegic migraine or complex migraine. And it was a very confusing time. And I was told I had intractable auras, which really limited me when it came to acute treatment. And what ended up happening and how I got my diagnosis is that I had an attack where my symptoms continued for 3 months. And the symptoms included the really severe hemiparesis and ataxia and dysarthria and other symptoms. And I ended up going to Jefferson for an inpatient infusion. And when you're admitted to Jefferson, you have to see a headache specialist there. And I was paired with Dr. Young, who is the headache specialist who wrote the first paper on MUMS and identified it for the first time. And he's known as the MUMS guy. So, and he has remained as my headache specialist since. And I now actually I have two headache specialists, one here in the city and then Dr. Young. And so he corrected that diagnosis. And I think he said, I have some news for you. I don't think you're going to be happy with it, but you don't have hemiplegic migraine. You have another type of migraine that you have never heard about. And I was surprised because I worked for a neurology clinic and I had never heard of this. But when I was on the train home, I read the 4 papers, the 4 publications that talked about it. And then I became really intent on learning everything I could about the condition.
Yeah, that must have been such a relief to finally have a diagnosis. It sounds like you went through a lot to get there.
Yes. And what was, I think, the biggest part of the relief is when you have the hemiplegic migraine and the intractable aura diagnosis, you have this really heavy weight of stroke risk on your shoulders. And that does not exist when you have MUMS. So even though your symptoms are incredibly disabling and stroke-like, I don't have the same fears that I have about stroke that I used to have. And because that stroke risk isn't there, I can be much more aggressive with my acute treatments, which is necessary with MUMS. MUMS patients need really, really aggressive acute treatments.
Yeah, I imagine the road to finding out what actually helps and works is a whole separate journey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've trialed a lot of different things and yes.
Yeah. So with that, I want to rewind a little bit. And what's been your overall treatment journey like so far? What kinds of things have you tried? What actually helped?
You know, it's funny when people say that they've tried everything and they haven't found something. I kind of laugh to myself because I probably would fall under that category as someone who feels that they've tried everything. But I never feel like that because given my line of work and just reading the research, I know that there's always something around the corner. So, you know, when I first was diagnosed, I went through the traditional step therapy and had the basic migraine medications. But soon after my diagnosis, like a year and a half, I moved to LA for a little bit to be a patient at UCLA. And they really stepped up my preventive plan and they started me on preventive medications that are more so meant for people with intractable or refractory migraine. And I still am on some of those medications today, and that would be Diamox and Namenda and Sabella. And so I've been on those since 2016, I would say, as well as Botox. And then I have added additional medications since then as my migraine disease has progressed. And I've tweaked things here and there since that first, I would say the most I trialed was within like the first year and a half. And then after that, it was more just refining and adding more things on. So I now take between 6 or 7 daily preventives, and a lot of those are intended for people who have refractory migraine, so mexilatine, or like I said, Namenda, Diamox. And then I also get the Vyepti and CGRP inhibiting infusion. And then I also get Botox. So I get all of that. And then with MUMS, you typically have to go and get inpatient infusions about once a year just to have a tune-up, and I'll get that done as well. So my preventive treatment plan is very comprehensive, and then in addition to all of that, I also use 2 neuromodulation devices, and so I use CEFALY as well as a vagus nerve stimulator. I use those daily. So a lot of combined treatments, but it's how I'm able to work, and it's how I'm able to walk and talk and live my life. And I've looked up, I would not be able to live anywhere else in the world and receive this treatment plan, and I probably wouldn't be able to receive it in a lot of states. So I stay here firmly planted in New York, and so I can continue having all of these treatments.
Yeah, I know location unfortunately matters when you have a disease like migraine to get that kind of help. So I know you mentioned CEFALY is part of your routine, which the great thing about CEFALY, it's not location based because you can get it without a prescription. But how did you first come across CEFALY? Were you skeptic at first, or were you ready to try anything?
I remember seeing people wearing the device on social media and being really curious. And I discussed it with my headache specialist, who at the time she was very cautious about any of the treatments that I would take, because she thought I had intractable auras. And also because I just have hyperalgesia and other things, but I was really determined. So I started using CEFALY, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And I learned that I do best with the lowest intensity. And I've tried to go up in intensities, but the lowest one is my sweet spot. And I've stayed there for years, and I have had great success with it. And typically, CEFALY is the first step. Anytime I get a migraine attack, that's the first thing I kind of start with is neuromodulation, and then I move into my acute like oral treatments or intranasal treatments.
Yeah, I'm always so interested to hear where everyone's intensity level is. I think the highest I ever get is like 21%. My sweet spot's pretty low in comparison. We have some that get to 100, which they love it. It
Yeah,
works for them. Absolutely.
amazing. That's amazing. It's like as soon as I turn it on, I'm like, beep, beep,
Yeah.
just to be like, okay, we're
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you found your sweet spot. So are you using CEFALY more for preventative during attacks or both?
I use it primarily during attacks, and I even will use it twice during attacks. I find it, first of all, really soothing. And when I will wear it when I'm working, and I know I'm not supposed to, but sometimes I have no choice. But then later on in the day, I will lie down and use it again. So that's kind of how I use it more. Because while I'm really good about taking my preventive medications, I can be not so good about doing my daily preventive neuromodulation. And there are other daily routines and habits that I'm not so good at either. So I've been trying to make it more of a goal to get better with my daily neuromodulation.
Yeah, daily routines are really hard. But the migraine brain loves that, right? So
Mhm.
it's great that you're working on that. How are you trying to fit CEFALY in now?
So, in fitting CEFALY into my daily routine, so it's my understanding that using CEFALY at night is what is really recommended, and that's where a lot of people have good luck and great success, I should say, more than luck. And integrating it in with meditation is I've come to understand is some people find really, really effective. And so that is more so how I would look at my treatment approach, because when I am able to integrate in my nighttime neuromodulation routines, it's kind of right as I'm getting into bed, I do my neuromodulation, I do my meditation. And that's one thing I've gotten really good at, is not looking at my phone in bed and just like going straight to bed and doing these things and going to sleep.
Yeah, that nighttime routine, I'm all for it. So I love that that's being built into your routine. I want to transition to talk about prodrome. What are your early signs with MUMS? Is it any different than what anyone else may be feeling?
Yeah, I think that what I'm going to say, a lot of people with migraine, especially chronic migraine, will relate to. It's really hard for me to identify my prodrome symptoms.
Mm.
Even now, after all of these years, I keep a daily symptom tracker, and so I try to bold what I believe is my prodrome. But because I can have such frequent attacks, at times it's been up to 28 plus days in a month, it can be difficult for me to identify my prodrome. What I've found is neck pain and kind of the tight neck, as well as kind of more of a coat hanger pain, can be a pretty clear indicator for me, as well as me craving, like I'll go through these like with like chocolate or gummy bears or something. So that can sometimes be an indicator for me as well. But those are the only things that I have been able to identify really just because my attacks are so frequent. It's hard for me to tell. I feel like I'm always in a prodromal state, and that's pretty common for people who have like chronic and more frequent migraine attacks.
Yeah, it's hard enough managing those symptoms, but then there's also the misunderstanding from people around you. What kind of misconceptions do you hear about MUMS, and what do you wish people knew more about or understood more?
Yeah. So I think the main thing is that MUMS is either hemiplegic migraine. A lot of people will reach out to me and say that they have hemiplegic migraine too. And so I have to make that correction. And then other people who think it's super duper rare. MUMS is not super duper rare. As my friend, Dr. White, who's a headache specialist at Jefferson, put it, she has several MUMS patients, and she sees lots and lots of migraine patients. She has several MUMS patients, and she doesn't have a single hemiplegic migraine patient. In the original study that they did at Jefferson, there were 20 plus patients who they identified with MUMS, and they only eliminated one who had hemiplegic migraines. So that just gives an idea of how much more common MUMS is. And I think that people assume because they haven't heard of it, it's really rare, but it's much more common. And I know we see so many people in comments on social media who say that they have hemiplegic migraine or complex migraine. And I now kind of more so, I look at that with a grain of salt, just because I know that the definitions can get really muddy and gray. I wouldn't say all of them have MUMS. There's a lot of confusion about what some of these aura definitions are. But I think that there's a lot of confusion about what's what. And those are the main things. And also that MUMS is stroke. I have been hospitalized and kept overnight several times because hospitals, even after my CT scan comes back okay, they still are like, you're still weak. We think you've had a stroke. And so I have to kind of go through those motions, which is good. They're taking those precautions. And then they end up learning a lot about migraine. But those are the main misconceptions. I think because the symptoms are so physical, there aren't a lot of the same misconceptions that someone who has migraine without aura would live with.
Yeah, I think that's why your page is so important, is just to bring that awareness. And like you said, they may not even know they have MUMS. They may think it's something else. So hearing your story and being able to bring that information is really great to their specialists. One thing I also love about your page and really admire is your perspective on finding joy, even when migraine takes so much. You've talked about seeking joy in your life, and how do you do that in practice? Are there small things that help you stay connected to what matters?
So one of the big things for me is every single day, regardless of how I'm feeling, I get up and I get dressed and I put on makeup. And that probably goes back to just all of the years I spent working in fashion, but it gets me into this mindset. And I never try to spend a day in bed, because for me personally, that would just destroy me mentally. I need to be more active. And even if I'm spending my entire day on my couch, mentally that feels different and exciting. So that's one of the things, is that I find a lot of joy in what I wear. I find a lot of joy in putting on makeup. I mean, what can I say? I like things that are cute. And fashion has always been something that I'm super interested in and excited about. And I still keep track of. Some of my friends still work in the fashion industry. So I, keep tabs on that. And then other things is that I try to do things that are pretty lo-fi and grounding. So I do a lot of training with my dog, and in particular, I do a lot of tricks classes with her because I know that that's what makes her happy. And so while on a day-to-day basis, when she's working, because I've trained her to be my service dog, when she takes a lot of classes, it's usually for tricks because that's how she has fun. So I try to have fun with her in that regard. And then gardening is another way that I really seek joy and peace. And starting kind of probably this weekend, next weekend, I will really start mapping out my garden and getting that established because it's just a really wonderful routine for me to have through the fall. And finally is prioritizing seeing and spending time with my friends. And I make the plans with them, and then that morning I pre-treat. So I'll use my devices. I'll even take a CGRP inhibitor like a GPANT, and I do all of those things, and we'll go and go on an adventure. And my friends are so wonderful and patient, and they pull over while I throw up on the side of the road. But by the time we get to our destination, everything is kicked in, and we're able to have fun and explore, and having those moments with my friend, really, it keeps me rooted in who I am and kind of takes me out of that feeling of always being sick.
I love that. Yeah, it's always little things that those lo-fi things that you could add up, right? It's a bank. You got to give before you could take out. So
Exactly.
yeah, I love that. I'm also excited for the gardening season. I have my seeds up, my lights up, and
Yep.
my dining room has been taken over by seedlings. So it's
Oh,
exciting.
that's so great.
Yeah. Well, you shared so much already, but before we wrap, for someone newly diagnosed with MUMS or just feeling really alone in their migraine journey, what's one thing you'd want them to know?
There's two things. There's two. Sorry. The
Even better.
first is watch and read, especially with MUMS, watch and read every available piece about MUMS. There's not a lot. There's 4 publications, like medical journals, and then all of the videos are either through an advocacy group or another official source. But watch all of those so that you can understand what's happening to your body, because the more you understand what's happening and why it's happening, the less scary it is. And also, the better you'll be able to self-advocate. And you'll know that you need to throw everything at MUMS. And you will know, okay, I need to have the, really strong acute plan in place every single time. I really can't afford to wait until it's bad enough, because it's always going to be bad enough. And I'm not minimizing other people's migraine attacks, but when you have paralysis or hemiparesis and things, and you are having to work or get somewhere, you really have to take measures into hands. And then the other thing is to get involved in migraine advocacy. And that kind of goes back to the education point as well. I have learned so much since getting involved in advocacy. It also brings a new sense of community and can better connect you with authorities in the space, and can help you identify misinformation and disinformation, and really empower you to self-advocate in the doctor's office or when talking to your family and friends. And I think that the more that the migraine community gets involved in advocacy, the better it is overall, because we can spread the voice and have more people in the world understand how disabling migraine is.
Yes, I love that. And I think you do a great job of helping in that space too. So thank you for always having great posts and being fashionable about it too.
Thank you. I do love clothes.
Yeah, it's funny because my mom will always say, "Put a little lipstick on. You're gonna put a little lipstick on." So I'm there. I'm with you. I grew up with that. So
Yeah.
it does help.
Yeah, just mine is like under eye concealer and mascara. Like if I
That's
didn't have my under eye concealer on, oh my God, it was
yeah.
a totally different person. But you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
And you move throughout your day, and you find the little things that make you happy. For other people, it's sewing or reading a book or listening to an audiobook. For me, it is putting on mascara.
Hannon, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story so openly.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, everyone, if you're listening or watching, if you're not already following Cannon, go check her out at Migraine Babe on Instagram or TikTok. She's such a powerful and honest voice in the migraine community, so it's a great follow. And if you want to learn more about CEFALY, the device Cannon mentioned in her routine, head over to cefaly.com to explore how it works and see if it could fit in your own journey. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Migraine Circle podcast.
Thank you.